to thee, my blessed Savior, I surrender all. All right, and we're happy to have Dr. Culberson preaching again here this morning with us. Dr. Culberson, come on up and thank you.
Well, it is good to be here. I know it's kind of unusual times with all the circumstances, and we do enjoy the snow. It kind of changes our schedules and everything, but nevertheless, glad to be here. I understand Daniel is at a wedding, and someone told me they thought it was Mark Capper's wedding, who was your intern, I guess, for a little while, and of course, one of our students. And again, it's my pleasure to come, and I'm going to come intermittently, and because of that, you might not remember the last time I was here, but nevertheless, when I do come in God's providence, I'm going to walk us through the book of Philippians. So we got started in Philippians last time, but now we're going to go back to the founding of the church, which is in Acts 16. So if you would like to turn to Acts 16. This is sort of a lengthy passage, but it's a narrative, it's a story, it's a drama, and hopefully we can see it that way because it's actually got some excitement in it as well. So let me read to you this, which is God's Word, and I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. The Word of God, Acts 16:11. So, setting sail from Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samothrace, and the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in the city some days, and on the Sabbath day we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we supposed there was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoke to the women who had come together. One who heard us was a woman named Lydia from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods, who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was said by Paul, and after she was baptized, and her household as well, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay." And she prevailed upon us. As we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners much gain by fortune telling. She followed Paul and us, crying out, "These men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation." And this she kept doing for many days. Paul, having become greatly annoyed, turned and said to the Spirit, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out that very hour. But when her owners saw that their hope of gain was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the rulers. And when they had brought them to the magistrates, they said, "These men are Jews, and they are disturbing our city. They advocate customs that are not lawful for us as Romans to accept or practice." The crowd joined in, attacking them, and the magistrates tore the garments off of them and gave orders to beat them with rods. And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely. Having received this order, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken. And immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's bonds were unfastened. When the jailer awoke and saw that the prison doors were open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing that the prisoners had escaped. But Paul cried with a loud voice, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." And the jailer called for lights and rushed in, and trembling with fear, he fell down before Paul and Silas. Then he brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" And they said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household." And they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all who were in his house. And he took them the same hour of the night and washed their wounds, and he was baptized at once, he and all his family. Then he brought them up into his house and set food before them. And he rejoiced, along with his entire household, that he had believed in God. May God bless this, the reading, hearing, and preaching of his word. May he bless us even now. And let's ask for his blessing in Christ. Let's pray. Father, we do come before you and enter into your presence, and thank you that by your great grace you've overlooked our many, many, many sins in Christ, and we can proclaim you and help us to surrender all to you as your followers. Bless your word now. Get this sinner out of the way, and may you speak to each one of us in some way that we are assured that you are speaking, that we are yours, that we are part of your family that needs to respond to you. And we ask it all in Christ's name. Amen. Many years ago, I had the privilege of walking into my dorm room and viewing two of my friends with Campus Crusade for Christ sitting on the bed of my roommate, and my roommate sitting there next to him. My roommate and I were thrown together. I was from the South, he was from the North. I was a Baptist, he was a Presbyterian. He was New Jersey, I was South Carolina. I had become a new Christian. He wasn't a Christian, but there they were, my friends talking to him, and I just sat on my dorm bed and watched what was going to happen. And my roommate, Mac, as he listened to a presentation, The Four Spiritual Laws, prayed the prayer and asked Christ to come into his life. I wasn't sure if it really happened. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. But truly, he came to Christ. I went and bought him a Bible. He devoured it. Today, 40 years later, really a little more than that, but far more than that, but for 40 years he has served with Wycliffe Bible translators. He was changed. It was so exciting to watch God come down and right before my very eyes bring someone, my roommate, into the kingdom of God. Well, as we look at the book of Philippians, we want to understand, where did the church at Philippi come from? And what we will understand is that sort of out of nowhere, the gospel enters into this city, this prominent city, and the church is established. And everything that happens is a bit unusual. And the first thing that we'll see is this unusual opportunity, a woman who is seeking God. The context is the first few verses in chapter 16 is Paul has this vision of a man in Macedonia. This is Europe. And so he travels towards the west because of that vision, and he ends up in this city, Philippi. Philippi was on what was called the Via Egnatia, or the Roman interstate. So the main road, the main drag, Philippi, is there, like I-77 or 85 or 95. It's an important place on the highway, the main highway. It was a strategic military city. It was full of civic pride. Today we would say it was an all-American city. Maybe they had signs up entering that said all-Macedonian city. We don't know. I doubt it, but they had personal pride about their city. It was also nicknamed Little Rome. And as Paul goes into Philippi, he thinks, maybe I can find some Jewish people here, a synagogue. That was his method. Go to the synagogue and then meet people and talk about Christ. So apparently, we're told that on a Sabbath day in verse 13, we, and this is Luke, Paul, Silas, we went outside the gate to the riverside. Well, he showed up on the Sabbath. He went looking for a synagogue, probably asked around, excuse me, but can you tell me where the local synagogue is? And apparently there is no synagogue for Paul to go to. It takes 10 Jewish men to start a synagogue in that day. So maybe there weren't that many Jews there, but certainly not many Jewish men. There was no synagogue. And probably somebody said, there's not one, but there's this little small group prayer meeting down by the river, and there are a bunch of women gathered together. Go down there. So, of course, Paul, eager to share the gospel, goes down, and it says, we went outside the gate to the riverside, and suppose there was a place of prayer. We sat down and we found these women. We spoke to these women who had come together. These women were apparently seekers. There may have been some Jews. Some of them may have been Gentiles that said, well, I'll convert to the Jewish religion, whatever that means. There's no synagogue, but there they are. And this one woman, Lydia, is a seeker. She certainly is a seeker. These women are praying. They're dedicated. They're religious. But they don't know God personally. And you know, that always gets to me because I grew up in the church. We went to everything. I'm not even sure I would call myself a seeker. I was an attender. And prayed, sang hymns, went to the services, listened some to the sermons. I didn't care for a lot of it. I didn't know God personally. And here are these ladies. Well, let's pray, let's worship. What does that mean? Well, it means they were going through what you should do if you're a Jewish believer and you don't have a synagogue. We can commend them, but they didn't have Christ. Lydia is highlighted. She probably had converted to Judaism. We can only guess, but she's a successful businesswoman. She's wealthy. She may have owned more than one home, but she certainly has a home in Philippi. There's a good chance she was like a traveling saleswoman who would go from place to place to sell her goods. She sold purple fabrics. She's well described there, purple goods. Purple was the color of royalty, so more than likely she had some really nice goods that, you know, she was the Nordstrom of her day, possibly. Pretty nice stuff. It was expensive. It was popular. People wanted purple. And it was expensive because the way they made purple goods back then was that there were these mollusks that they would have to find in the water and pull them out and break their shells. And then they had to get to an organ in the neck and sort of squeeze it, and out would come this colorful material, this gook, right? But colorful that they could use to create these dyes. There were other colors: rose, red, sea green, blue, purple, though that's the color you're looking for. And you can just imagine this little bit, you've got to get a lot of it, and then you're going to try to make something. So the bottom line here is that she's this businesswoman. She's well off. She has done well. She's got some kind of religious propensities. And in some worlds, we would call her, and it might even be applicable to Charlotte in some ways, she was up but out. She was an up and outer. She was up socioeconomically, right? She was doing pretty well. Even religious. Sounds a little bit like Charlotte. And yet out of the kingdom. But she's seeking. She's seeking. She's curious. Paul comes. She listens. And the text says the Lord opened her heart. The word there means to enable one to perceive. So who knows how long she'd been praying, worshiping. I don't know if that included singing, but showing up at these services by the riverside, a few women. But this day, the light bulbs go off. The Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was said by Paul. Isn't it intriguing? It doesn't say what Paul said. But somehow she heard about Jesus. And I'm sure Paul said, Jesus is Lord. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus rose up from the dead. Oh, can you imagine? She'd never heard that before. The Lord opened her heart. She perceived it and she believed it. But belief's not even mentioned in the text. Just like, whoo, this is it. She paid attention and she was baptized. So we know Paul would not have baptized her unless this is what I want. She was baptized and her household as well. She comes into the kingdom. She has so much, but she doesn't have Christ. But today she finds him. God is at work. He is at work in this world. He was at work there. Intriguingly, this woman is the first Christian in Europe. And intriguingly, Paul had that previous vision. The man from Macedonia, come help us, come help us. Paul goes into town, and it's a woman who is the first convert. How unusual, how intriguing. The first church is not in a synagogue. It starts in her home. Paul finds this seeker. She comes to know God. It is the hope, I hope it's the hope, of this church that you might find seekers, up and outers, down and outers, whatever they might be, and they might find Christ. I have a sister-in-law who for many years was involved in an Eastern religion. She and her husband, who's no longer living, that was my wife's brother. But they were in this Eastern religion, and I'm not going to go into all those details, but I would just say that Kathy and I were like, they're way out here and so far, and it's like, do you have the list like I have this? Like, they will never come to Christ, right? That's my list. These people will never come to Christ, right? But the time came, and I can't go into all the details. All I can say is that she did come to Christ. And when she was a new Christian, she came up to me and she said, "Rod, let me tell you what happened." And I said, "Please." And she said, "When I finally realized Jesus is God," she said this, not knowing the scriptural reference to Paul, "it was like scales fell off my eyes." I said, that's kind of like Paul. God is at work. And so we pray. And we go like Paul goes. And here is this unusual opportunity. A woman seeking God comes into the kingdom. The first European convert, the church starts in her house. But that brings us to an unusual encounter. A girl serving demons. A girl serving demons. And if Lydia was an up and outer, here we flip the scene, and this is a down and outer. You can't get much lower than this. A slave girl controlled or possessed by a demon. And so Luke writes, as we were going to the place of prayer, so we don't know what day it was, how many times. I mean, that little church maybe starts by the riverside. Maybe it's in Lydia's house, but we're going to go down to the place of prayer. Maybe others will come. And one day we were going, and there's this slave girl. She has a spirit of divination. And her owners were making money off of her because she was predicting things. Now, I'm a little old, but in my day, even as a kid, there was this woman named Jean Dixon, or we called her Jeannie Dixon, right? And she made a killing with fortune telling. Or sometimes you're out in the middle of nowhere, you're driving down the road, and you see this little house off the road, but you see this big giant sign that says, Sister Chloe, palm reader. Right now, we're not really sure what Sister Chloe's up to, but nevertheless, people trying to make money. And these owners were making the money off of this slave girl. And I have to say that we need to be cautious because our world is filled with all sorts of mystical ways to try to find God's will. And so we have the horoscope, the zodiac, astrology, all of those things. Those are an abomination to the Lord. That is not how you find God's will. They are dangerous. And yet, I don't know how many people start their day like looking at zodiac signs and what does that mean for me? And what am I like? And all of these things. The slave girl has a spirit of divination. The owners are making much by their fortune telling. And she is ultimately controlled by an evil spirit. And she follows Paul around. And this is just, again, so unusual. She's following Paul around and crying out, these men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation. I mean, I love the text. I mean, she's doing this all the time, maybe every time they go. And Paul finally is annoyed. It does seem kind of annoying, doesn't it? You might think Paul, like, y'all listen to her. She's on to it, you know. But he's bothering her a little bit. James chapter 2:19, Luke chapter 8:28 tell us that demons do recognize who Jesus is. They know who Jesus is. I came across a quote 2 days ago, A.W. Tozer. If you don't know Tozer, read Tozer. Tozer said this, Satan is a better theologian than all of us, but he is still a devil. Right? The demons can proclaim Christ, but they're still demons. That's another scary part about life in the church, is that people can do all those right things and yet not be Christian at all. So she's crying out, they are servants of the Most High God. The way of salvation, how does she know that? The demons know. And somehow they see the follower, the messenger of Christ coming. So Paul gets annoyed. It may be that it's more than annoyance, it's a grief over this girl and her condition. But nevertheless, he can't stand it any longer. And so the text says, he turns and says to the spirit, not the girl, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ, come out of her. And he came out at that very hour. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on demon possession. That would be a whole nother sermon, but I do believe there is such a thing as demon possession in the world. I think it is prolific in places where there is no Christian influence, and I hear it from missionaries. But I have heard of it in the States, and I think that it is here as well. I'm not sure I've seen it myself, but I do think our culture has a problem because our culture does not acknowledge the spiritual world or the evil spiritual world, and it is there, and they will say, that is a mental health problem. That is an emotional problem. I think there's a lot of truth to that too. But I do think that demons are working on people and they work on us. They just cannot control or fill believers. Unfortunately, however, many of the problems we do face come from our own selves. And all the things we talk about, addictions and personal problems, they are realities. And sometimes even our culture will say, they have the demon of alcohol, drunkenness, drugs, the opioid crisis. I mean, that's a horrible crisis. What's going on there? Addictions. Is it all purely mental health problems? I don't know. But what drives people to give up and to find that as their resource? Sexual freedom, pornography, all these things, they are controlling us. And whether it's demon activity or not, let's just face it, they are controlling powerful forces. And I find it intriguing that in our culture, something like alcohol abuse and drug abuse, opioid abuse, our culture will say, stop, stop, stop. But in these other addictions, the sexual problems, the pornography, our cultural actions, more and more in our culture, it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, can you imagine? We have a culture now that thinks pornography, and gambling is another one. I mean, I don't want to be standing up here and just naming all these issues, except they permeate our world and our lives. And I'm not saying they're demonic. I'm just saying we've got these problems. And do you think Satan is smiling when people are destroyed? I think that he is. They may be inherently sinful, but there may be more to it than that. So we have Lydia, this up and outer, who seems to almost quietly come into the kingdom. And then we have this slave girl, and Paul has to exorcise her, so to speak, and get that spirit out of her, the drama of it all. And it had to be dramatic, because we're told that when the owners saw that the hope of their gain was gone, they grabbed Paul and Silas. They are angry. Something's going on here. Someone's just been transformed in their presence. Interestingly, there too, we're not told that she became a Christian, she believed in Jesus, but the text is pretty powerful. Lydia comes in quietly. This girl is completely changed. And they get mad. And they take Paul and Silas and drag them into the marketplace before the rulers. I mean, it's like grabbing you and taking you to the cops, the policemen. And they say, these men are Jews. They're outsiders. There's prejudice here. It's like they're bringing in these crazy thoughts. I'm sure they didn't say, they just ruined our business. These guys are wacko. And they're advocating customs. What customs did they advocate? You can be new in Christ. Probably what they were advocating. They are disturbing our city. We as Romans do not accept these things they are saying. So, the crowd joins in, attacking. It's a mob scene. Everyone's like, all right, this has been a really incredible day, right? All this action. We sit around waiting, and here it is. And then the magistrates tear the garments off of them and give them orders to beat them with rods. It's not always easy to be a Christian. None of us are probably going to face anything like this afternoon or this week or maybe for some time, but the cultural pressures are coming that if we stand where we stand, biblical belief, more and more we're being seen as odd, hateful, all these things. Here we are. They come after them. Well, we had an unusual opportunity, a woman seeking God, an unusual encounter, a slave girl serving demons, and now we have an unusual surprise, a man shaken and saved. A man shaken and saved. After Paul and Silas are attacked, they are beaten, and we are told in verse 23, they had inflicted many blows upon them. In the Jewish world, if you were going to whip or put blows upon someone, you would stay at 39 because 40 was the max, and the Pharisees would say, just in case you miscount, stop at 39 because you don't want to break the law while you're beating up somebody you think has broken the law. But in the Roman, there's no telling. They beat them, and they beat them, and they beat them, and we don't know how many blows they put upon them. And then they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer, keep them safely. You better keep an eye on these guys. And you have to wonder if they said, they got some power or something. We're not sure what it is, but something's with these guys, so you better watch them closely. So he takes them into the inner prison, wherever that is, the most secure cell, and fastens their feet in stocks. What that means is that they would spread their legs out as far as they could go and then clamp them into stocks. And so there's Paul and Silas probably laying on the floor of a dark, dusty, dirty, damp prison, feet stretched out. And actually, the way they did it, they wanted it to hurt. So you're in prison, and here you are. And here they are. This jailer, let's think about him for a second. He is probably, as we look at studies, how does a guy get a jailer job in that day? He is probably a very hardened, retired Roman soldier. And he's been given this nasty task, and it's kind of like you're at the end of your career, but we got a job for you, and it's not a pleasant job. Okay? Taking care of prisoners. The jails would be dark and unsanitary. Why would you even take that job? Well, one thing that we believe is that attached to the prison would be housing, a little jailer's house. So it's kind of like you're retired. What are you going to do? Here's a low-level, very low-level job, but at least you have a place to live, and so he would probably take it. This guy is not putting on smiley faces. This guy is tough. He's not going to be kind, and all he's got in life really is probably this job. Apparently he has a family, but it's the only way he's going to keep his family alive. The job is everything. It's everything. And what is the everything in your life? What keeps you going? Is it money? Is it prestige? Is it a possible promotion? Is it popularity? Is it sports and athletics or your favorite sports team? So many different things, but he's got a job. He puts them in this inner cell and these stocks. And then the text says, verse 25, about midnight. So it's late. I mean, it's been a long day probably for everyone, and particularly for the jailer, it seems. We'll see. Paul and Silas are praying and singing hymns. Oh, wait a minute. It's midnight. Their legs are all stretched out. They've been beaten. Who knows how much? They're laying down. Oh, Lord. What were they praying? We're not told. Thank you for letting us serve you. Thank you for letting us preach the gospel. Thank you for bringing the spirit out of that demonic spirit out of that girl. Thank you for Lydia. Thank you for our wonderful trip to Philippi. We don't know. But they are singing as well. I don't know what they're singing. Probably something from the Psalter, the Psalms, but we don't know. They're singing hymns, and the text says the prisoners were listening to them. Well, they weren't going anywhere, we know that. But, we don't think they were putting their fingers in their ears, say, na, 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 na. It said they're listening to them. And suddenly there's this great earthquake now. This is a miraculous work. Earthquakes, they're providential, but this is one that's the timing and the circumstances, so that the foundations of the prison are shaken. Had to be so scary. And immediately the doors pop open and their shackles come off. And they're free. Everyone is unfastened. When the jailer woke, now this guy's had a long day. Like I say, he's an old retired military guy. It's been a long day, and it takes an earthquake to wake him up. Did he hear the singing? I'm going to suppose actually that he did. He sees the prison doors are open. He pulls out his sword because he figures they've all escaped. And actually in the Roman world, it was considered proper at times and sometimes an act of valor to commit suicide. So he's not even thinking, he's like, look, his job is gone. If those prisoners are gone, they're going to kill him anyhow. He's just given up. He's going to kill himself. It's very dramatic. He draws his sword. He's about to whatever. And Paul cries out. I don't know what all Paul could see, but he sees enough. Do not harm yourself. We are all here. And the jailer, and he must have had some underlings or someone, I need lights. And they would have to bring lanterns in, and he's looking at number 03567's here, right? Number 8743 is here. I mean, he's checking it all. They're all here. trembling with fear. He falls down. No one's gone. They've had an earthquake. These guys, there's something going on here. Sirs, what must I do to be saved? Now, are you thinking, where did he come up with that concept? You think he started the day and he got up, ate breakfast, thought, I sure would like to be saved today? Was it from the prayers? Was it from the singing? Did someone tell the story of the slave girl? Did he hear about this little group of women down on the riverside that had come to Christ? We don't know, but he understands he needs to be saved. So he cries out, and they say, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household. The earthquake is something, the prisoner's not escaping is something, but I have to wonder if listening to those believers in those stocks, praying and singing, I have to wonder if the prison concert is what put him over the top. And he became curious. But then, surmising only, maybe Paul started preaching and he fell asleep. I'm just pretending, okay? No, but he does fall asleep. And when his world is shaken, he wants to be saved. They spoke the word to him and to all who were in his house. And see, probably what happened was, he said, while you're telling me this, look, I got some family over here. Maybe wife, brothers, sisters, children, we don't know, grandchildren. I want them to hear about this too. They go to the house, they're probably attached to the prison, and they took him the same hour of the night. He washed their wounds, and he goes from jailer to nurse and doctor. And he is like, these guys have given me this message. Salvation. And he gets baptized. Paul is not too beat up to go baptizing this guy and his family, apparently. And then he brings him into his house and he says, honey, fix up some food and let's feed them. And the text tells us he rejoices along with his entire household that he had believed in God. How unusual. What an unusual beginning to this church. And I want you to remember that Paul is writing to them 10 years later. God had done something. And remember, when I was there, they have followed his career as a missionary, sent him help, sent him support, sent them Epaphroditus, who risked his life to go visit Paul in house arrest at that time. 10 years later, this church is still going on. We can rejoice in that. God is at work. We have to trust he's at work. That's why we're here. Do you know him? Are you praying? Are you seeking others? I tell you, I teach evangelism and I'm not always confident he's at work. God is at work is the slogan for Reformed University Fellowship that I've been involved with for 40 years. But he is at work. 15, 16 years ago, they tore down my dorm at the University of South Carolina, where my roommate Mac became a Christian. I'm pretty nostalgic. So he's in Papua New Guinea, but I send him a little email and tell him, they tore down our dorm and, this, and we lived in, I believe, 2 different dorms there. And he sends me this email in response. Hi, Rod. I guess I'm not sentimental. Although reading the names of the dorms rang a bell, and he quotes, of the original 6 towers constructed in the late 50s and 60s, 4 remain: Douglas, Laborde, Moore, and Snowden. Now, those were torn down as well. But he says, didn't we live in Snowden? Yes, Snowden 416, I could tell you, but he didn't remember. I think I remember the names Laborde and Moore too. I became a Christian in those dorms. I can remember after praying the prayer in the 4 spiritual laws, looking out at the deep blue November sky through the honeycombs, these concrete things. The thought came to me something like, how can this sky be different if it's just the sky I've always known? Something is different here. Well, something was different because I died that day and rose again. Blessings, Mac. God is at work. And I tell my students, you want to be involved in people's lives, at least trying to lead them to Christ or help them, because don't you want to be there when God shows up? There's nothing like it. Let's pray. Father, we are here to honor you. We love you. We at times are faithless. We are weak, but you are at work, and you will work in unusual ways. And so we look to you and just pray, Father, that you will use us and use this church and encourage everyone here that you are working and you will reach people here in this community for Christ. And we ask it in his name. Amen.
Please stand and sing with us if you would.